So if you're wondering about the hat, I thought my presentation could be extremely short because you might already anticipate what I'm going to say. For those of you who are at the bar a little bit later, I'll just park the hat and actually dive right into it. So my background is very much FMCG, so it's not quite in the agri space, but I'm hoping what I can do today is inspire a little bit of thinking around innovation and how it's relevant in the space of sustainability today. So, right, let's crack on. Innovation. What is innovation? So innovation really is about creating intervention to solve important challenges. And the key word here is about important challenges. So you've been kind of doing this for a long time. We're hardwired to do it to survive and thrive. I mean, if you think back to the very beginning, the wheel, steam power, things like the internal combustion engine, and all these things have increased mobility, which has also increased complexity. So if you think today, you can go into your supermarket and buy any product you like, regardless of season or even the origin. And what that's meant is that packaging has had to become increasingly complex because products are traveling a much further distance and they're having to protect the product for much longer. So, in the words of Leonard Cohen, you can have your tea and oranges all the way from China, but they probably will look a little bit like this, very much packaged and probably flown in on a jet plane. The energy, innovation and energy has also created a lot of opportunities for packaging innovation. So if we think back to Edison's electric heating company, that has significantly amplified the power generation through coal combustion, and it's vastly increased our capacity to do work. So for the first time, we're running factories, they can run nighttime, daytime, 24/7 operations. We're making loads of packaging. This, coupled with the expansion of Ford's assembly line mode of production, has meant that we can manufacture things much faster, much cheaper, and that's led to this plethora of very diverse packaging formats that suits every consumer convenience and need under the sun, which is very exciting if you're a marketeer like myself. So what that's meant, really, is that packaging innovation to date has solved consumer challenges. So you think about packaging that's a bit hard to open, so bring in the ring pull tin. I can't imagine ever going back to tuna without a ring pull, or tin of beans without a ring pull. This deodorant on the bottom right here is developed for the visually impaired and the physically disabled. So if you're in the shower and you've got a disability, imagine trying to open or unscrew something that's round. So that's been really, really useful for that group of consumers. Child safety is a big thing, so packaging innovation, helping the elderly. So this Padlock system actually was a World Star winner last year. It's got really enlarged lettering on the pack. It even has Braille for the visually impaired. And at the same time, it's safe for children. Portions and measures, I mean, this is a great way, right? You can use your product some now, some later. You don't even need tools and measures to be able to work out how much of the product you need. And individually wrapped products are great for portion control and sharing. What about consumption on the go? Earlier I heard somebody talking about the rise in takeaways and sort of eating in is the new taking out, so lots of home deliveries and people ordering takeout as a treat. So packaging has really had to innovate and develop in this space to make these consumptions more convenient for consumers. So one of my favorites is the Heinz ketchup at the bottom left. So this is a great innovative piece of packaging. You can peel the foil off to dip your fries, or you can squeeze your ketchup onto your plate, right? Multi-functionality. Another one is this U-Mix, cocktail mix. So it's a ready-to-drink cocktail, but some like it strong, some like it weak. So the thinking here is you literally unscrew it and add as much alcohol in as you like. So that's really great personalization. Variety and multi-pack, for those that are indecisive. You don't have to choose, you can have it all. So in this space, what we've seen over time is bag in bag, box in box, box in bag, bag in box, box in bag in box. It goes on, right? What about gifting and luxury? So as a marketeer and coming from the duty-free background, this is a very exciting space for me. You know, for luxury gifting items, fragrances, these sort of things, packaging has served such a tremendous purpose in presenting products in the best light possible. I'm not sure how much of this packaging is actually retained and has any useful life after its initial use though. Children, right? Combine toys and candy, and you've always got this winning combination. And so packaging has had a lot of innovation in this space. The master of this area is always Kinder Egg. Their formula is unchanged for a very long time. And as a mum, it's great those 2 minutes where your child is building the toy inside, and then sadly the plastic is discarded and ends up heaven knows where. Packaging innovation has also played a very important role with the advent of online ordering. So, you know, it needs to be able to protect product and preserve product so that it arrives at its destination, which, as we've heard, is growing further and further in distance in its prime condition. And that has led to a lot of over-packaging, but that's not bespoke only to the online sector. We also see a lot of this in traditional retail space where, in order to meet consumer convenience, we end up with this really crazy scenarios of over-packaging. I think I beat your banana picture because I've got a whole lot of them there. And these allergy tablets, you know, it's just packaging gone mad. So, unfortunately, although packaging innovation really has done wonders to solve specific problems or challenges for a specific group of stakeholders, which is consumers, it's also led to far-reaching and unintended consequences that has helped us deliver ourselves to our greatest challenge yet. Right, our wicked challenges. So, what does the continuing road of innovation look like in the context of today's complex, enduring and systemic challenges of climate change and plastic pollution? So the theme for me today is really about how do we divert packaging innovation and innovation in general and move it away from causing these type of problems to solving these type of problems. So the challenge is clear: global warming and the need to decarbonize our economy. And where is that greenhouse gas coming from? 3/4 is coming from energy generation. So this is transport, this is energy used in industry, it's energy used for heating, and 84% of this is derived from fossil-based fuels. So it's really not a great space for us to be in. So the challenge here is for us to electrify our heating and road transport, pursue low-carbon technologies for shipping and aviation wherever possible. And the same is true when we look at things like life cycle assessments. So in a previous example, it's pretty clear that the packaging item itself is very rarely responsible for a high proportion of the carbon emissions. So looking at this life cycle assessment, it's fresh produce, so it's kind of our area. And the greatest driver of carbon emissions in this space is actually at the farming stage. Okay? We love the farmers, we need the food, but 80% of the emissions is driven through agricultural use of land, deforestation, methane emissions from livestock, fertilizers, farm machinery, animal feed, you know. So if you're looking for a quick win to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, are you really going to focus all that energy just on a piece of packaging? This is a much broader issue. It's a much bigger systems-based sort of issue. Transportation comprises 10% of the emission, and the remainder 10% is actually made up of a combination of retail emissions. So you think of refrigeration in transit as well as in your in-store environment, processing, and then also the packaging. So it's a very small component, and that trend is true across lots of different product categories. So whilst packaging itself is not responsible for a lot of the greenhouse emissions, it has such a powerful role to either help or hinder emission-cutting strategies of the supply chain up and down, and even throughout its own life cycle, even at end of life. So what is the challenge then specifically for the packaging industry? Well, It's all about reducing the greenhouse gas emissions through three very simple areas. This is about material choice, production processes, and distribution. So what are you making your packaging from? What production processes are you using, not just for the packaging, but for the item or the product category that you're packaging? And also, how are you transporting it? How are you moving these things around in your supply chain? So that is only possible if we take a different approach to our innovation process. So coming from a brand management background, it's always about marketing, leading teams of product innovation, and it usually starts with the consumer. It's all about the consumer. How can we solve the consumer's problems? And very rarely on those project teams is there anybody representing the supply chain, procurement, quality, distribution. And so what we really need to see happen is a change in the innovation process that becomes more systems-based, more inclusive and collaborative. So today is really the time for packaging technologists to shine. We need skilled, intuitive, and highly adaptable packaging technologists today to work with multiple stakeholders through more inclusive processes, proactive utilization of scientific tools, life cycle assessments, to guide material choice and packaging design. So packaging design briefs can no longer be the sole domain of marketing, and sustainability can no longer be an afterthought tick box exercise within design briefs. So we need cross-functional teams, and they need to work very closely together through the innovation process. Design and packaging technologists must collaborate with recyclers at the start of the process to say, well, are the materials we're looking to use truly recyclable in practice? Is the combination of these materials truly recyclable in practice? What are we going to do about additives, oxo-degradants? What about colour pigments? How relevant are these for recycling at next or end of life of the life cycle of the product? Marketeers need to start about thinking, we're going to start dedicating more space on pack to have a dialogue with consumers, to increase the uptake of recycling. Explain to your consumer what to do with that pack when they're finished using it. Sales and category managers need to work more closely with the retail environment to understand where there are take-back systems or recycling, front-of-store recycling systems. What we see growing now, especially in my area, is reverse vending machines, right? But they can only take certain shape and size bottles. So marketing needs to know about this up front because it could be very important in shaping your design. Quality assurance must reconcile testing standards to account for colour variances. So this is especially important when using recycled content. And procurement should seek local suppliers where possible, and distribution must collaborate with design on any elements that might be likely to improve distribution and transport efficiencies. And it's not only about the innovation looking forward, this is very much about cleaning up our own house, going back to basics, and reviewing existing packing lines to say, well, how can we innovate these better for the circularity and for climate change and to reduce plastic pollution. So, I know there was a lot of talk about this yesterday. Eskom, right. The energy debate is very relevant in South Africa, particularly because Eskom is now the world's biggest power polluting company globally. It emits on its own more sulfur dioxide than the United States and China combined. Okay? This is what should be keeping us awake at night. So our packaging innovation must focus on how to future-proof machinery and technology. Locally mentioned it yesterday, we need to make sure that we're buying the most energy-efficient technology where we can. And how do we future-proof that technology? Can we set it up in a modular type of way that it can incorporate a range of different raw materials without being left with stranded assets? And it also needs to consider new technologies. So, can we buy equipment in that can be run using renewable energy, solar power? How do we incorporate electromobility in our operations, electric forklifts, these sort of things? And we're establishing new manufacturing sites completely. What is the opportunity for things like green building principles, like closed loop water systems to harvest rainwater from gutters? This is when I say it's not just packaging innovation, it's packaging in a broad context, and we really need to, at every turn, question ourselves and say, well, is this the best thing for the environment? Distribution is another really important area where we should be aiming to source locally wherever possible. I know Annabi mentioned the Proudly South African, the sourcing locally yesterday. And we need to try and decentralise operations where possible. So what is the opportunity for in-plant facilities and moving manufacturing sites closer to both raw materials, end-use markets, export ports, and all of that will help reduce emissions generated from refrigeration and also transportation. And reducing mileage is an especially salient point, considering 78% of all microplastics in the ocean are generated through tire particle abrasion. Right? So these are trucks on the road 24/7, driving all across South Africa. You know, could we do more with rail? Potentially. We need to streamline secondary and tertiary packaging, and this is especially relevant where we're doing co-packing or repacking, customization sort of operations, which often leads to a lot of wasteful packaging, but also double handling of goods. So how do we get more innovative and smarter in that space? And at the end of the day, these types of centralized distributive systems are also more resilient to the effects of climate change, such as extreme weather events and pandemics like COVID. I think we've all seen that really clearly. So you can't have the conversation about sustainability without talking about population growth. I know that Yaki mentioned yesterday that we've already reached our peak in terms of global population growth, but the same is not true for Africa. So the projection is that in Africa, 1 of 4 people will live by 2050 and 40% by 2100. So by 2100, 40% of the global population will reside in Africa. Nigeria alone is forecast to outnumber the population of the entire United States by 2060. Okay? So we have a double challenge in our hands. Lots of people. How do we decarbonize our economy whilst bringing those people out of poverty and reducing that difference between the rich and the poor? Furthermore, there's been a lot of talk yesterday about the urbanisation, and we're experiencing rapid rates of rural-urban migration, and this is going to challenge the traditional role of packaging in the delivery of goods and service to city dwellers, with the growing potential of shared services, refill and reuse models, which will need to be delivered in a safe, hygienic and cost-effective manner. So this really has the potential to reduce food waste if consumers are only buying what they need, and also it's a great space for packaging innovation to get into now. Right, then we come on to the animals. So I know there were lots of talk yesterday. Yaki mentioned the proportion of insects and the biodiversity that we lost. So, you know, we can't have the discussion about greenhouse gas emissions without talking about the methane from livestock. And it's quite salient when you think that already 94% of mammals on Earth comprise humans and the animals we consume by weight. Right, 94%. And 70% of all agricultural land, this is a global stat, is used currently for grazing pastures. So it's to feed the animals that we eat. 26% is used for crops, including those for animal feed. And so that really highlights the intense impact on land use and deforestation. How do we innovate better in that space? So, you know, moving away from a meat or an animal-based diet will give rise to new product categories. You know, how do we change what we're eating? I'm a meat eater myself, but I think I could eat a hamburger patty made of maggots if I didn't know what was in it, right? We eat bologna, okay? So it's not too far off. So these new product categories would also require new packaging formats, and also packaging innovation that's made from biomass. So we're talking bioplastics, compostables, and these will all need to be scientifically evaluated. We can't have marketeers running off saying, this is a great PR campaign, we're going to make something from green plastic. Fine, that's great. What they need to do is carefully and scientifically evaluate that impact on planetary boundaries, such as land use, fresh water, and agricultural nutrient runoff. Even paper. sourced from intensively managed monoculture plantation forests can accelerate biodiversity loss. So there's a lot to think about here. And whilst the challenge for energy is all about decarbonising, moving to renewable, it's not possible to decarbonise organic chemicals and their derived materials. Right? These include things like solvents, adhesives, explosives, detergents, personal care products, textiles, rubber, and of course plastic. All right? It needs to be made of something. So the challenge here is slightly different. The challenge here is how do we derive our carbon from renewable sources? And the Nova Institute earlier this year did a very interesting study. They did a scenario analysis which looked at how could we globally achieve this renewable carbon for plastic by 2050. So it models 70% of that renewable carbon is coming from recycling. Right, so I know we can't recycle our way out of it, but by Jove, we can get a lot of our carbon from it, right? And yesterday we spoke about mechanical recycling emitting less carbon, but there is still a role for chemical recycling, particularly for packaging that's difficult to recycle. Your multi-laminates, your really contaminated sort of packaging, or your packaging that's just uneconomical to recycle. And chemical recycling then will still be a better option than incineration, because plastic will eventually reach an end of life. It can't be mechanically recycled indefinitely. 20% is expected to come from carbon capture and utilization. So this is reasonably new technology, CCU, and this is where carbon dioxide is basically sucked out of the atmosphere and converted into synthetic naphtha to make plastic. I'm sure it's a lot more complex than that, but the thing to say about this is it's only possible and sustainable if the energy used to undertake this process is itself renewable. So this probably isn't a suitable option for South Africa with Eskom. And interestingly enough, this model only models 10% of the carbon is coming from biomass, and that's in recognition of food security and land impact. So this biomass is coming from things like lignin, a byproduct of the wood process, and also high yield crops. So sugarcane is the one that we're very familiar with, but also marine biomass, which to date has not penetrated mass market. So algae has a tremendous potential to form as a feedstock to make plastic. And the last area here is that currently some of the land is used for biofuel feedstocks to make biodiesels and that sort of thing. So with the advent of electric cars, if they become cheap enough for Africa, and also hydrogen drives, so Jaco mentioned that yesterday, that's a feasible option. And as those things start to replace the need for biofuels, could those existing facilities and land use be diverted to instead make naphtha and ethanol for plastic? So that's another area that could feed into this model. But even if you do all that stuff, great, and you're sourcing your plastic from renewable carbon, if you don't dispose of it properly, you're still going to fail at the next big challenge, which is plastic pollution, all right? Effectively, packaging is the canary in the coal mine, and I'm not just talking plastic packaging. When we start to see plastic polluting the environment, it's a really clear early warning signal that our system is broken. We cannot sustain our careless approach of take, make, dispose, especially in South Africa, which is ranked 11th worst globally at managing its waste, where 34% of households have no formal waste collection. And this is the key driver of our litter crisis. So just as plastic isn't the sole cause of the problem, it cannot be expected to solve the problem on its own. Packaging innovation also that merely focuses on replacing plastic with anything but plastic will not solve the problem either. We need system change to address the system problem. So a very exciting report that came out last year by Pew and Systemic modelled what this scenario could look like to 2040. And this Breaking the Plastic Waves report is being developed specifically looking at South Africa. The data is not available yet, so this is the global view. And obviously, it'll be applicable depending on the material type and where you're sat geographically. But the bottom line is that there is no one silver bullet. There's a number or a range of options and system change, and those changes need to happen together. They need to happen concurrently, and they need to happen soon. So the two scenarios that are modelled, the middle scenario there is business as usual. So this is if we do nothing, we just carry on the way we are. And if that's the case, our proportion of mismanaged waste goes from today's global average of 40% to 56%. All right, we know that figure is already probably higher in South Africa due to the prevalence of non-compliant landfills. So landfills that are not covered, waste blows away, they're maybe not lined, so you're getting dangerous leachate entering the water table. We have a lot of open burning of plastic in South Africa, and of course there's the failure of waste management to keep up with our rapid pace of urbanisation. In the system change scenario, it basically says we can achieve a reduction in our section of mismanaged waste down to 10%, but we can only do it by leveraging the other elements here. So let's just have a look at some of those in a bit more detail. Under the reduced scenario, it's important to note that the scenario doesn't include lightweighting. Right? It's great to lightweight wherever we can, but it's again not the silver bullet. The problem with lightweighting, specifically when we're moving away from rigids into flexibles, is we remove value from the recyclate. So the waste reclaimer has no interest in collecting that piece of packaging. It has no value. It doesn't reach a recycler, and it ends up as litter in the environment. So we need to be really careful about lightweighting versus right-weighting. You know, in some cases we need to be making things heavier to give it a second, third, fourth life, and to make it more reusable in practice. It's also imperative for resin suppliers, transporters, and converters like ourselves to become really tough on ourselves in our own operations to eliminate the leak of plastic noodles and pellets. And so initiatives like Operation Clean Sweep are really, really important in this area. So there's a number of different levers under reduce. Elimination is the one that normally gives people hives. But this is really all about eliminating overpackaging. Okay, so we've seen some horrific examples over the last 2 days of overpackaging. This is really the obvious place to start. One of the areas that's quite useful, or one of the examples that's really great, is this mailer. It's an envelope mailer, which requires no additional components. There's no bubble wrap, there's no styrofoam, there's no extra padding and stuff in this envelope. We also need to think a little bit about multiple components. So when you're looking at things like bread bags and closures, you know, is it really necessary to have a closure with a tamper-evident sort of foil, then the closure, then you've got a PET shrink perforated on the outside? I mean, 3 layers of protection. Wow, what are you saying? You know, I really think the more we can simplify and get smart around our design and innovative use of materials means that we can have things like one-piece tamper-evident closures. And what can we do around bread bag tags? You know, is there a smarter, more innovative way to close bread bags, or to at least move to compostable tags, for example? Also, there's a lot of room for innovation when we look at modular design. So can things be designed in a modular way? Vermont does really well, where, you know, if one component breaks, you just replace the component. So you're replacing parts, not holes. Okay? So with the Vermont model, your broom breaks, all right, you don't have to go and buy a new broom. You buy a new stick. If your scoop breaks, you buy a new scoop. You don't buy all those things from scratch again. So it's just a mindset change. And then, a bit broader than that in terms of innovation and eliminate, is the idea of, do we all need to own our own items? So I'm so excited and thrilled to hear about your projects with your crates and your return systems and things. That's really, really bang on where we want to get to. But just illustratively, I've included this, is the average power drill is used for somewhere between 6 and 20 minutes in its whole lifetime, right? Yet half of all American households own one. Okay, I mean, how many of you have a drill at home? Okay, I've got about 10 because my husband does lots of DIY. he'll tell you. But the reality is, these consumers didn't want a drill, they wanted a hole. Okay? So it's just this change in mindset that we need to start adopting when thinking about innovating for sustainability. Consumer reuse is another area where we can eliminate unnecessary plastic. So what is the potential for reusable straws, tampon applicators, refill packs? So we were talking this morning about shampoo bottles with the pumps. Do you need to buy a pump every time you buy a shampoo bottle? Or do you just really want to top up the one you've already got? Okay? By the time you finish the shampoo, that pump has got a good couple of miles still in it, right? Yet we're throwing it out and then buying a new one. Just doesn't make any sense. And how can we think about innovation in terms of extending the useful life of products, especially things that are notoriously wasteful, like one-way packaging? You buy a flat-screen TV, comes in a massive box that your children like to hide in, and that's got to go out and be collected and recycled. Can you extend its life by turning it into something that has a second life? So in this example, I love it, it's become a doll's house, for example. Repack is also an organisation in America, and what they've started to do is provide reusable and returnable delivery packaging for online purchases. So your stuff will arrive in a reusable bag, you'll return that in the mail, and then you'll get a discount on your next online purchase. So just a really good way to eliminate waste for one-way shipping packaging. A really nice example here as well is this. It's a bit small, but what it is it's a product called Top Secret Refill. It's a makeup system in the States, and basically it's a lovely design, compact. Talk to the ladies now. Compact with a brush and a mirror, and when your blusher powder or your eyeshadow is finished, you pop out the pan and then go and just rebuy another colour. Pop it in and off you go. Okay? So you haven't eliminated the whole piece of packaging. So just thinking in that modular sort of way. Product reformulation is another very powerful area to unlock the reduction of plastic. So sometimes it is essential to explore this reformulation. So you think about things like toothpaste tablets, mouthwash tablets, shampoo bars. These things have been around for quite a while. And what about concentrates? So the home care space are looking at this now very seriously. Can they make available concentrated pods and things that can be mixed with water from your tap in a reusable plastic rigid bottle? There's really great room for innovation here. And of course, SodaStream is the absolute king when it comes to this. They were well ahead of their time when it comes to consumer reuse and refill. Another area here is around elimination is new delivery systems. So this area in the scenario is actually modeled as having the most powerful impact on reducing carbon emissions and plastic pollution. And so we see a number of these different programs popping up around the globe. Starbucks is already rolling out their cup share program, and that allows consumers to pay a small deposit for a reusable cup. Consumers are also offered discounts when they bring their own reusable cup, and on the flip side of that, they're charged an extra fee if they're given a paper cup. Another great example is Algramo here. It's a South American system. It started off as a vending system, so consumers buy a piece of renewable packaging at the beginning. The vending system has now become mobile, so it actually travels into communities, and then you can take your packaging along and literally buy a pence per gram. However much you want, you buy and you pay by weight. So it's also got a great impact on eliminating waste. Dasani is also active in this space, so they've got vending machines for water, so self-serve refill water stations. And then you pay a bit of extra money and you've got the option of flavouring it or adding carbonation, and it's all run on a cashless system with smartphone app technology. So this is a nice crossover between tech and sustainability. My favourite category, this is what if. So this is really where marketeers like me get very excited. So in terms of the elimination or the reduction driver, one of the most wasteful and polluting pieces of packaging around is the disposable nappy. Okay, so they say the first one that ever hit landfill is still there, and that's quite a thought considering our rate of population growth, especially in Africa. And so one gets to thinking, what is the possibility of moving to reuse systems in this space? So could one, for example, have a nappy with a disposable liner that's washable, and as an extension to that, you have a centralized system for bringing your dirties back. It gets washed centrally in a specialized wash service, a bit like your dry cleaning, and then you next week pick up your new set of nappies. So this is already happening in the UK. And the other example, this is really radical here, is the notion of, we're currently in a system where we mass produce lots of packaging and then go out and hopefully find buyers for all the stuff we've made, and maybe it gets dumped somewhere, who knows. So this turns that model on its head and it says, well, actually, the real skill that designers and innovators like ourselves offer is the design and the cleverness in that piece of packaging, or it's a bicycle helmet or something really with a more premium sort of value. So could you sell that design to a consumer who then goes online, downloads it, personalizes it, and pops off to their local high street where there's a dozen of these 3D print shops and has it printed just for them, right? No waste. It's exactly what they needed, and you've still added value as a business. All right, so the second scenario was about substitutes, and this is very interesting because this excludes substitution of things that are already very well recycled. So in this model, even though it's the global model, there's already recognition that, don't waste your time trying to substitute things like mono-material rigids that are highly in demand, they're highly recycled, and they have a value for the collector, and certainly don't look to substitute them with single-use glass, aluminium, and aseptic cartons, which have been found to have potential negative trade-offs in things like cost, emissions, and recycling rates. So it takes a really sensible, practical approach. It does, however, focus on replacing those non-recyclable elements. So it talks about things like sachets, multi-layer films, food service disposables. So here's an interesting stat. Globally, 59% of plastic reduction is comprised of multi-material, okay, so complex sort of structures, and flexibles, right? Yet, they only comprise 14% of what is collected in the formal collection stream, okay? And then they comprise 80% of all plastic leakage into the ocean. So if you want to spend a bit of time innovating, this is probably a really good place to start. You've got a category that's big, it's prolific, it's not collected, and as a result ends up in the ocean. Right? So this is a really good place to start. So what can some of the substitutes look like? We have compostables. So this is an area which is the most recommended area. And I say that although it's still small, it's still niche. Okay, we're not going to go move all packaging to compostables because that isn't the right way forward. So the main switch is modelled into compostables, but only where the compostable material is approved to meet the relevant local compostability standards for the country you're in. And the gold standard for this is always home composting, because if it can be made to be home compostable, it can be industrially composted. So this is probably not a huge opportunity yet in South Africa, but certainly one that warrants some time to look at. We already see it in areas such as tea bags, compostable coffee pods, and my favorite, which is a cosmetic bio glitter, which has pigments designed to biodegrade quickly and safely in natural freshwater environments. The other thing to say here is that compostables are very well suited for packaging where there's direct food contamination. So you think of soft cheeses, you think of takeaway food packaging, you think of ready meal trays, those sort of areas. So a really nice example here is this Waitrose ready meal tray. They're rolling that out across a number of their different ranges. And this is a fiber-based packaging which can also be recycled along with waste paper or be home composted to break down completely within 28 weeks. So you see it's very specifically defined. It's home composted, and that can't be composted in industrial compostable facilities, because that requires all the extra heat and stuff. So this has been designed for home composting, which is a huge win in the UK. So again, just going off-piste for a second, this is a great bit about being in marketing, by the way. You get the creative license. So just another way we've thought around innovation and packaging for sustainability is biomimicry. So when we're thinking about innovation and packaging innovation, what inspiration can we draw from nature where there is no waste, right? It's the perfect circular system. So, for example, how about banana leaves for takeaway packaging, right? I mean, how long is that packaging going to last you? How long does it take to eat a burger? I mean, probably quicker for the blokes. But, that's how long you need that packaging for. And then you don't need it anymore, it's gone, right? Also, what can we learn from biomimicry when looking at properties and adaptations of things in nature? Seaweed, so this is a water capsule. It's been around for some time. Some of you have probably seen it. Contains water. It has no flavour. It's made of seaweed, completely edible. What about tortoise shells, sea cucumbers, leeches, and chitin from insect exoskeletons? So chitin is a really, really interesting one. It's the second most abundant polysaccharide in nature, behind only cellulose. So if you're looking for a compostable or a bio-derived material, this is the one to look at. The structure of chitin is similar to cellulose with functionally comparable hard keratin, and it's already proving useful for industrial purposes. Why not packaging? Okay, there's a lot of innovation potential in that area. Another area for substitution is paper. So they kind of split into two areas, and again, it's quite small, it's quite niche. For specialist applications. So paper is modelled as having a useful substitution for fruit pellets, takeaway packaging. So McDonald's, for example, have launched this. It's actually an ice cream sort of soda float cup. It's 100% wood fibre, the cup and the lid, with high performance tolerances, and it can be recovered in the existing paper streams for recycling. Another really interesting one here is Entex wet wipes. So this is really new, and what this is paper-based alternative to synthetic non-woven wet wipes. And the problem with those is that they tend to release microplastic fibres in the environment. So in South Africa we have the annoying habit that a lot of these wet wipes are flushed into the sewage drains and they end up in the ocean, but also they cause a lot of blockages and things. So, could we move to a paper-based source for these things to at least combat the microplastics problem? And then in terms of coated paper, so this model really looks at substitution using paper coated with a maximum of 5% coating, and that coating must be compatible with the existing recycling paper recycling streams. And it's particularly hailed as being useful for things like confectionery wrappers, sachets for powdered drinks, ready mixes, that sort of thing. So Smarties is already going this way. They're moving away from their plastic-based packaging to paper-based sort of packaging for their confectionery. And also Unilever is adopting new high-barrier paper-based packaging for things like its Coleman's ready sauce. So what do we have here? Maggi or Royco's, those sort of things, right? Your dry sauces. And this is recyclable again in the existing paper stream in the UK. So it really just highlights the importance. That piece of innovation would have been done with recyclers at the table, with packaging technologists at the table, with consumers at the table, multifunctional, cross-disciplinary teams in the innovation process. So the final thing to say on substitution is that really any substitution with any material must be considered on a case-by-case basis, using localised LCAs or life cycle assessments to avoid even worse environmental outcomes. Okay, so it can be a case of out of the frying pan into the fire if you're not careful. Mechanical recycling, so this is the third most important one, and it is important because mechanical recycling feedstock offsets 48% of greenhouse gas emissions relative to virgin material. So again, if you're going to engage in packaging innovation, this is a really good place to start. You know, how can you make packaging that includes recycled content? And the scenario here also highlights the importance of shifting from multi-material into mono-material for the pure reason that it is more recyclable. And I know the same is true for South Africa. So looking at some of the examples here, we see these are great examples of multi to mono materials. A lot of work has been done in the pharma space with tablets and capsules, medication. So there's companies that are removing the PVC and the aluminium to achieve monomaterial thermoform blister and lidding film. 100% recyclable because it's monomaterial. And it's also delivering a lot of benefits in reducing carbon emissions with the removal of the aluminium. Tethered and mono-material closure systems is another really important area. So we spoke earlier about trigger sprays and pump bottles. A lot of these things contain extra components that are made from different materials like metal springs, and sometimes you've got silicone seals and that sort of thing. We need to move these things to mono-material for the sake of recyclability. And then in Austria, there's also a lot of work being done around meat packaging. So they're busy rolling out fully recyclable mono-polyprop flow wrap solutions. And that application there is for things like mincemeat, sausages, and cheese. And that's as a replacement for rigid trays with a lid made with all sorts of mixtures of materials. So this is early innovation, but this is exciting stuff coming down the line. And then Asco Nobel, this is a company that's trying to crack the problem we have with the crisp packets, so your chip bags, which if anyone's been on a beach cleanup, you always find an egg packet. It's a huge, huge problem for us. So what they're looking at is a process that combines two water-soluble polymers, which results in all the functionality of the different layers that we currently have, but being delivered in one recyclable layer. So our packaging technologists and scientists are on the case, and I think as a packaging innovator it's important to understand and keep your eye on the horizon at what's coming down. So really, as I say, this is all about moving from multi-material into mono-material. So we also look at the recycled content and what's the potential for recycled content. So a number of companies are already doing this. So we've got Lego, Barbie from Mattel. They're already making toys from not only bio-based plastic but recycled plastic. We've got aluminium, recycled aluminium tubes. We've also got things like this toothbrush here in Norway that's made from recycled plastic, and the packaging is actually made from molded recycled fiber. So just really interesting solutions. You know, you can imagine walking down the supermarket shelf looking at all the packaging stuff we buy on a regular basis and just consider all the different components that become wasteful because you basically throw them away the minute you get home. So Henkel is also doing this really well. You know, they're looking at dishwashing gels in bottles made from 100% recycled material. And the last one, sorry, I recognise my time's up. The last one is a company called Mybell Group, which is at pre-commercialisation stages of making PET bottles from 30% carbon dioxide. So that's amazing. That's that process of sucking the carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere, deriving the nectar and the ethylene and making plastic. Phenomenal. Okay, great. Thanks very much.
I'll be brave enough and ask one. I don't have these fancy collecting. It's fantastic innovation, but if it's not going to be picked up, it's still going to end up as litter. It's still going to end up on our roads and on our streets. So how do you change the mindset together with the packaging?
Yeah, I think it's a really important point. You know, it comes back to what Yaki was saying yesterday about the behaviour change. So, and this is where I think the innovation process can't be linear in its approach, starting with the consumer. You know, how do we make a great piece of packaging that's going to create convenience for the consumer? You almost have to start at the end and say, well, looking at the recycling systems and the landscape in South Africa, what are the best materials? And you almost start there and then reverse engineer it. You know, having those people on the packaging development teams. But also I think there's a huge opportunity for brand owners to start taking ownership in the messaging that they portray with consumers. You know, you pick up packaging and a lot of space is used for some really crazy claims and things. So, you know, the question has to be asked, well, there is a responsibility there, I think, and an opportunity for brands to own that space and to start those dialogues with their consumers to say, well, buy this product. The packaging is not a grudge purchase. It's not just a means to an end. It's an important way to deliver you a product that is going to be really great. And guess what? It has a second, third, fourth life, provided you do X, Y, Z. So I don't think it's an easy answer, but I think that's probably a good place to start. Anyone else? No?
I would go one step further. Just with your one slide, you've got the informal traders. How would you then get packaging to those guys? I mean, because that looks like a really big market there to capture. But how do you get them? I get the impression that a lot of them either borrow or get an old milk carton or whatever, and then they use that. But how would you then go forward to try and get that into townships and rural areas as well? Because I mean, it looks like quite a good win in a rural environment.
No, absolutely. I mean, I think you know, we don't have exactly a stats about what proportion of retail goes through informal, but we know it's massive. And I think this is again the opportunity to bring those communities on board and to understand the systems that are already in place. You know, it can't be that you're making packaging to service what you think that consumer wants. I think that you've got to tap into existing delivery models and say, well, how can we optimize this? How can we make it better? How can we make it cheaper, faster? But also give you the convenience, but not leave you with the waste at the end of the day. So, I mean, this is a huge challenge that companies like Unilever are wrangling with in their areas like Indonesia, where a major part of their home personal care products are sold through sachets, and it's all about price points. So, how do you sell something to somebody? He only has a rand in his pocket, but he desperately needs to wash his socks, right? So he needs to buy some powder. So this notion of value for money in the pence per gram concept, so buy big and save money, isn't really relevant in a lot of those markets. And the result is that you get a lot of this low value packaging. It's lightweight, it's portion packs, and it's very polluting in those markets. And so they're having to go back to the drawing board to say, well, you know, how is this need already being met informally? And that's why I say there's huge potential for refill models that gives people the flexibility of either using their own packaging or being very much in control of how much or how little they want to buy. Anything else? Great. I mean, you're free to contact me afterwards if you get any brainwaves of ideas or you discover some new packaging from crickets or whatever. I think it's an ongoing debate, and I think it is just about the mindset change. So thank you very much.